Hello, this is Wmpyr. Here to talk about this five right here. This is a list of weapons that I put together, thinking that when it comes to ancient combat, this is a good base. Yeah, I know there's battle axes, morning stars, uh, there's projectile weapons. There's a bunch that's not listed here. There's a million different weapons that I left out, but I felt like this was a good base. And from this base, I kind of feel like there is a one system here. I come from the Kia, Kali Escrima Arnis viewpoint, where we have a one system. And that's the way it was taught to me. They didn't use that word one system. That's something I created later because I just had to give it a name. So I call it the one system. But the idea was you're learning one method with the stick and then stick the Escrima stick, also double sticks. And with once you get enough practice there, now you could apply that to different weapons, including blades, various blades, one-handed sword, a machete, a knife, and then also empty hands and improvised weapons too. But you're just learning one system, but you could do a whole bunch of different weapons, even though you only learned one thing. And I was like, that's very efficient. That's very cool. I like that kind of efficiency. I feel like I'm getting a really, really good deal learning this art, so I liked it. It really resonated with me, you know. But also from a more like body mechanics point of view, it kind of makes sense. Now here, now going back to further, I'm talking about like even since like the caveman days, I feel like there was we can make a one system from that. Right now, I know back in the caveman days they didn't have a sword, but this is I'm looking at the human history, and on the battlefield, like back in the caveman days, I think it really came down to the spear. And you look at like you look at tribes today, tribes that have had barely any contact with the civilized world. They have spears. So that kind of leads me to believe that it's just for humankind living on planet Earth, we need a spear. And we need it to survive in the battlefield and also against predators. It just made sense for hunting and for combat. Spear works. And then you go to like thousands of years later, or way more than that, and you're looking at like the perfection of that. I think we could view like the Chinese martial arts and stuff, and they revered the spear. They flat out say spear was number one. And of all these ancient weapons, it comes down to the spear. That's number one. A lot of other cultures I know go with the sword, but you know, to be honest, I feel like the sword is the odd one out of this group. So let me skip the sword, and then we go to the one-handed sword, the knife, and the empty hands. What they all have in common, to me, is, and what I'm interested here is unarmor combat. So you're not wearing armor, because from the battlefield going to the city life, I feel like they had to abandon the armor because in everyday life it just gets in the way. You know, if you're in constant battle after battle, it makes sense. You need armor, but and even just being on the battlefield alone in war, you want to wear armor. That's just logical. But for everyday life, where most of the time you're not going to get attacked, it gets in the way. So I'm interested in that because that we could relate to today because today we do the same thing. We don't wear armor when walking around, going to the bank or the grocery store or the library or wherever. We don't wear armor. So I feel like this one system can work for today, and that's what I'm looking for. Now, I'm not going to walk around with a spear or sword, but I feel like understanding this could help me in today's modern day self-defense. And that's what I'm interested in, is to use this ancient method that we have forgotten along the way. I feel like we humans have forgotten this one system that existed. So the sword is the odd one out. The reason why I say that is because with the spear you can jab, and why not thrust? You can thrust, but it's so committed, and without armor you shouldn't be. Unless you see a huge opening, you should be jabbing. It is my understanding. It just makes sense. It's logic, right? So use a spear, use the jab, right? That's your primary. So from the jab and from the spear, we go to the one-handed sword. We're really talking about fencing here. So when you look at fencing, well, they jab. They could pick you apart with the jab. It's super scary. If that's ever been done to you, you can only imagine how scary that would be. You can't do anything. You're trying to go in, they don't let you, and they just pick you apart. And it looks effortless, and they're not committed. That's scary. It's so fast. And then same with the knife. You could do the same thing with a knife. I call that knife fencing. And then number 5, and I know, back in the day, 2006, I was telling everyone about knife boxing, but then later I realized there's something called knife fencing. And I felt like knife fencing is superior for self-defense. But now I feel like knife boxing and knife fencing is actually related. But just for teaching wise, it's easier to make that separation and say knife boxing and here's knife fencing and here's the difference. But really, I think they're the same thing. But anyway, let me go to number 5, empty hands. So in empty hands, we're talking about boxing. You look at boxing, there's the jab, right? So all of these except number 2, jab. Number 2, they don't really jab. What's up with that? And I think there's a lot of different reasons why they don't jab. And with a sword, it's just harder, and it just doesn't make sense. We're talking about like a long sword, or we're talking about like a katana sword, where you hold it with 2 hands. It just, the grips and all, the weight, the engineering, everything, it's kind of the odd one out. If you could jab with the sword, you should. And I bet we would. We would have. But, it just doesn't work. But that's why I feel like it's the odd one out. And then the sword introduces, because it's high tech. Out of here, the most high tech in my opinion, it introduces the edge. And now with the edge, if you want to use the blade to its maximum capability, you're going to be slashing rather than stabbing. So it is a unique thing. But it is, I think, important to understand that, and that's why I put it in this list. So anyway, that's it for now. Thank you for viewing, and take care, folks.